Let's get into topic number 4. We'll slide quickly into boxing. And it was a big one on Saturday. The first Riyadh Season card funded by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Turkey Al-Sheikh on U.S. soil. And it was the return of Terence Crawford for the first time in 1 year since he demolished Errol Spence in their long-awaited welterweight unification. He moved up to 154. He took on the largely unknown Israel Madrimov. And for all the celebrities that showed up and any of us that thought Crawford was going to make quick and easy work of this guy, turns out Madrimov with that 350-fight amateur experience, despite having only 10 pro fights, he was up to the challenge. This turned out to be a chess match at the highest level and an enjoyable one that did produce, though, a weird fallout of narratives coming out of there. So we got a lot to talk about here, Chuck. BMO Stadium or BMO, whatever you want to call it there. And there's a lot we have
BMO.
to... BMO.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot we have to talk about the pacing of this card and all the weirdness. There was a lot of weirdness on this card.
Grisham, man, like you're mentioning all the celebrities. He's like trying to identify all of them. That was fun in
that
itself.
Was fun to see for a 19-hour pay-per-view. Let's talk about this at the top. It goes down as a unanimous decision for Terence Crawford. He becomes a champion in a 4th weight class, but it was close. 115-113, 115-113, and 116-112. First and foremost, Chuck, what'd you make of the scoring and how did you score this fight?
I would like to know what you thought of this, too. I had it 115-113.
Same as mine, but for who?
Well, I had it for the right guy, which was the guy who won. Did you have it that way?
I had it for Crawford,
all right.
Yes.
I thought for a minute I was going to be like, okay.
I didn't know we didn't prep this.
Okay,
I didn't know where you were coming
So
with.
I did think, though, and you can tell me if you felt the same, that Crawford had to win those last rounds, though, to get it. I felt like it came down to that.
It turned out on 2 of 3 scorecards, it was even going into the last round. So he needed it, and boy, did he step up, by the way.
Yes, he did. And I think that if you wanted to look at Crawford at any point where it started to look, I think that people were just in wait, right?
They were.
Like, when's he gonna start doing?
When are you gonna figure him out and kick his ass?
When are you gonna figure him out? And it just didn't happen. But I think the closest you came was in those rounds, and I think that that's what distinguished it in the end. I'm like, to me, it was like, listen, man, he was able to do more in those last couple rounds at the very end that kind of steered it for me, and I think that. That's why I'm like, Bud Crawford, I'm like, because he didn't look good or live up to the expectations doesn't mean he lost the fight.
Well, that's what we need to get into. Did he look good? Mostly. I thought he looked very good, but I think there are things we definitely learned about him at 154 pounds and things we definitely learned about him against what turned out to be a world-class opponent. And forgive us for not knowing that because, look, Madrimov hadn't beaten world-class competition. He was only 10-0. He was a legitimate world champion
Crawford
at 154.
Had a knockout streak.
Crawford has knocked out everyone he fought at 147, including in his last 11
That's what
fights.
I mean. He has more knockouts than the guy had professional fights at this point.
And look,
in a row.
even when Crawford steps up against great competition, he finds a way to change southpaw, figure you out, wait for you to make that mistake or that opening, and get you. What made this fight what it was, which I thought was technically brilliant. Not an overly through-the-roof classic of entertainment, but those that know, like, you got to see a lot of the greatness from Terence Crawford need to come out, just not in the way that people thought. People thought, okay, he'll just step on the gas. He couldn't do that against Madrimov, but also Madrimov couldn't do that against him. This was kind of like Sandhagen Umar, like 100%. I'm saying. It's at such a high level that they both couldn't make a mistake in open it. But what we saw was Bud doing what Bud does, make adjustments, make more adjustments than him. I think the biggest story of the fight was how great Madrimov fought. I scored it 7-5 for Terence Crawford. I did rescore it again on the train this morning to get a, non-distracted look, and I came out the same way. Yeah. Do I think there's a ton of close rounds? Yes. Do I think a score for Madrimov or a draw is crazy? No. If you had it 7-5 Madrimov, Chuck, there's rounds you could.
I know. Trust me.
They both risk something. By playing it so surgically and so carefully, you always risk what's going to happen on the scorecards because when you lower the output for yourself and your opponent, you're judging on such specific moments of apples and oranges comparisons.
When you go back and rescore, do you just do it with no sound? You just watch it, or do you still listen to the commentary?
I had the sound this time. Okay. I love the guys on that broadcast. I don't think they had a great call of this fight.
I heard a lot of criticism about that as well. But I was only asking because...
But also, DAZN, can we stop with the 4-man booth, please? Can we just stop with the 4-man booth? Like, please.
That is true. I think that you hear guys like Jim Lampley. I hear guys who are just, they're old in the game. They've been there forever, and they just have the same kind of like cautionary tales with boxing, which is always like, listen, before the fight, right? Like they say, will Crawford win? he's a huge favorite. I think it was minus 900 or minus 1,000
Which
at
is
one point.
crazy.
It was nuts. It was stupid. But like they caution you, like, can Madrimov win? They say no, probably not, because there's a subjectivity layer to this, right? In the judging, that says we are on American soil. It says there's a crowd that's going to influence things.
Sure.
And I always think that this is the craziest thing. Now, we get this in MMA. It's just a very smaller. You get 3 rounds or 5 rounds. You don't get 12. But it's always a strange thing that you have to contemplate going into a fight like this. So that's why I was asking, when you rescore it, do you take those in? Because I'm almost like, if I rewatched it and it was trying to be completely objective, would I come across it? Would I maybe see it the other way? I know that Madrimov had his moments. He had his moments. That right hand, there was a couple times
rounds
where he
8 and 9, he was peaking.
That's what I mean.
It looked
it's
like he was on his way
I felt like, and I was like, man, this is going to be crazy if this is the way it goes down. I think part of it, and you tell me too, man, because we're in a day and age where gambling is, people gambling on the fights has become so widespread that it sways everybody has an opinion on this.
Everybody's got an angle, including Long Island Luke over there. The Mile
sure
High Club Minute.
I'm sure you had some kibble on this one. But it's a different thing. And I think coming off of that, the Spence fight, where he knew, and from the second round on, basically, he's showcased, like, he was just, his power was translating. Everything was just so fluid. He couldn't miss. It was his virtuoso performance. I don't think he's ever. So you put that together. I think some people are like, "Where's that?" They wanted to see
where's against this guy we never heard of. But I want to be fair here and say we had reason, if you watched a lot of Madrimov tape, to believe what the odds were telling you. Now, I don't think minus 900. I mean, boxing odds are definitely more bloated, further away from reality than MMA, because they're trying to induce the big bets. But I think that if you watched Madrimov's fights, he didn't beat a lot of killers. He only had 10 pro fights. You couldn't gauge how good he would have to be when he steps up against this level, and how much he was going to be willing to commit to try to win it. What do I mean by that? I mean by this. Even Crawford was shocked at this one thing, that Madrimov brought such an educated game plan with Joel Diaz as his trainer, but he never wavered from it. He stuck to it, even ultimately to defeat, right? But because he was willing to
People hate game plans.
Because he was willing to not waste his punches, and because he was willing to commit to an active upper guard the whole time, never, same thing in a way, but differently, that Tyson Fury did to Vladimir Klitschko when he upset him. He used that active guard, and Klitschko's just sort of like, I'm not really sure. He did that to Crawford the whole fight. Unfortunately for Madrimov, his commitment to that is what lowered Crawford's output and gave him a chance to win it. But it also meant that if he was going to take more chances to try to win it, he was probably going to get countered and lose. So he had to almost be perfect, Chuck, and he came as close as you can come to doing it.
And it sucks because he'll never get another chance. Well, he won't. I don't think so, man.
I think that's why Eddie Hearn went nuts, and we're going to get to that in a second. There's so many things to talk about here. But I have to say, Madrimov's commitment to that guard, even Terence said it afterwards. He said, look, I was waiting for this guy to slow down or to see his technique fail, through fatigue, where I was going to come through. And Bud always does that. He figures you out late and he walks you down, and Bud tried that. But to Madrimov's credit, he never got tired. He never lost his poise. He never lost his focus. He showed you that he had the true championship mindset to come in there and keep pushing. And I thought he won round 11. I thought he had moments late.
That's
I thought
interesting, because I thought that's the one that it probably hinged on somewhat too. Like, I thought that Bud won that one, but I didn't go back and rewatch it.
I had Bud. I had Bud 4-2 at the midway point. Then Madrimov went on his run on my scorecards. He ended up pulling even on my cards. And then I thought Bud pulled away, despite losing round 11, was able to just 7-5, just win it. But here's the larger narrative question here. There's two questions that are I think aligned. Bud he's either 37 or he's about to be. Like, I think it was unfortunate for him that he waited a full year to come back, that the business didn't line up. He wanted Canelo and he couldn't get it. He thought he was going to rematch Spence because that was the contract. Spence decided last minute not to. I think it hurt him in terms of his activity level for sure, but I think it also hurt the commercial level to some degree. And then, like you said, now he's back and everybody's like, okay, our number one pound for pound's back. Let's see him do exactly what he did to Spence. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same opponent. It wasn't the same setup. So, Chuck, the two questions are, did he show you that he's old and fading? And does this make it where he shouldn't want anything to do with Canelo? So let's merge those together and sort of talk about it. Chuck, I don't think that this meant he was old, or that this performance made him look bad. In fact, I give Crawford credit because he had to bite down and dial down on his focus to the craziest level, and was still able to find moments against a guy who was so defensively responsible. We had no business understanding that Madrimov could be that good that he was on Saturday, because he hadn't had to against any pro opponent. But to his credit, he raised his level all the way up, where Bud had to face that, still figure out a way to win against a bigger opponent, and still was the guy landing the better, bigger punches late. To me, Chuck, is he the same guy he was at 32? No. But there's levels to this game, and he not only moved up a division, he fought the surprise of the division. He fought a world-class guy, and he still found a way to beat him.
I appreciated it at this level. I think that that's great, because that means you are a true purist. I get tired of people just like, oh, you know, he didn't perform well, or they see something that's disappointing. And you know what, man? I know we're going to talk about this. The pacing of that show didn't help. Like, just the fact that you kind of limp into your main event like that is just like, oh man.
I saw Cliff Roll had a great tweet, which is basically like, they put so many pitfalls into that show going later and extending that you get to the point where you start questioning, why am I even staying up for this? Do I even care about this fight that much? They got us to there. We'll get to that.
Okay.
But I don't think Crawford was too old.
But wait, do you think my big thing was this? I felt like Madrimov fought defensively, like you said, responsibly. He was able to, his head movement was great. Like you said, everything is his wickets up. Like everything looked like he was kind of sticking to making things as complicated as he could. But did you think that this was the thing, you know, having watched Crawford from, you know, going back to his original weight class all the way up now to 54, that his power wasn't translating? Or did you think that he just
level. No.
That's what I worried about with this fight,
also,
honestly.
I thought he could have been able to stop Madrimov if Madrimov wasn't the real deal. Madrimov showed a great chin when he needed to. He showed great offensive creativity in that second half to be able to, once he was able to slow Bud down a little bit, find moments to land big shots. But I just didn't expect this performance in every single category. And neither did Bud. I think he thought he was going to mop up on him. So, Chuck, I don't think that he's a step down outside of the obvious level that aging is going to lower your overall output, your overall ability to dig deep and deliver. Was that compromised a bit with this age? Maybe to some degree, but he still figured out how to win. But with that said, I do think we learned enough about him, what he looks like at 54, what his strengths and weaknesses are, and one of those is the power will never be the same at this level than this in the lower ones, that I think this performance was enough to show him and all of us that we do need to stop talking about this Canelo fight. I think we do. I'm not going to go and be like everybody else and be like, see, he never should have done it, because I think that was the fight, and he wanted it and he tried it. I think coming out of that
riding off that momentum, he might have been able. You never know.
No one had more momentum from one fight to another, maybe in boxing history, than that moment. If he would have hit that fight at the right time, he was peaking. Who knows? I'm not saying he definitely gets knocked out and handled, but there are levels, there are weight classes for a reason. I know that he only seems to want, and to his right, to make big fights on the way out, and he is one of the handpicked golden child of Turki Al-Sheikh, you know, is outspoken, one of his favorite fighters. So he's going to get those opportunities. But if you look at his own division right now of where he has a world title, there's a lot of interesting fights. There's Tim Tszyu, right?
Yeah.
There's Jermell Charlo coming back, the former champion. There's Madrimov now, who has shown himself to be an elite player. Sebastian Fundora, who's a big player in this. Who am I missing? You got Lubin. Oh, and Errol Spence potentially coming back, although Crawford did shoot down any want to rematch that.
Where do you redirect him if he's not going to?
And then you got Boo Tennis basically saying, I want Crawford so bad that I'm willing to come up to 54. You've also got Teofimo. Can we jump to the Teofimo sound quickly here?
I think you saw from Terence tonight.
The age is catching up to Crawford. The age is catching up to Crawford, and I would love to get Crawford now before it catches to him later on. It's already there, and all I can say now is, let's see what he does next. I don't think he should fight Canelo. I think he should fight the guy that's coming up next.
Now, I know Crawford's ego.
Third person, baby.
I don't think he's going to go from telling everybody he wants to fight Canelo at 68 to fighting a dude coming up from a couple weight classes below. But my point is, I think he has enough creative options to find some big paydays and also some things that can add to his legacy. I want to get your take, Chuck. I no longer feel like I was starting to believe that he could go into that fight and have a real big chance of an upset win. Now I just think it's going to look like Rory versus Mousasi. Remember that? Where it's just sort of like, this is not going to work.
100%. And Turkey, basically, like beforehand, right, is like, yes, I've already made the call. Wait, now I could see why Canelo would probably be like, sure, we'll take that money.
No, Canelo wants to only do what Canelo wants to do right now.
True. He's got a lot of money. I don't really see, because I think when that's the thing, right? 154 pounds. That's probably. I'm good with that. I don't really need to see.
He's 37 years old.
I don't need to see him try to do that.
So
like,
that
at
would
this
be
point.
2 more weight classes.
I know.
So if that's how
14
good,
more.
I mean, what did Madrimov give you the opinion in the belief that he's probably as good as he gets at 54? Probably, right? Like that's as tough of a fight as Bud has actually ever had as a pro.
Yeah, I think so.
Outside of the Gamboa fight where there were moments where he got hurt and some craziness. So he proved that he's on. Like, here's what I'm going to say. I tweeted this and I mean this. If Bud stays at 54 and gives us a couple more on the way out against the true elites, I think the Tim Tszyu fight could be big money-wise.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be so fun entertainment-wise because Bud now, like I said before, he's still super elite, but there's realities of his age. Not washed, but there's reality of there's only so much he can do moving forward. I think that's going to make, now that these guys are bigger, they have more power.
It, though? Like, I hear people mention it, like, did you actively see him slowing down from the
No, I
obviously
just think
his
the
offense
age means
output was much different in the
Yes.
Swiss fight. But like,
I think Madrimov, because he's stuck in that form and that mold and was so difficult the whole way without exposing himself and being able to take Bud shots, that it turned into this longer chess match than Bud thought. But I guess my extended point is I think they won't be this tough for him, but I think he's going to find more of these extended action chess battles where we're going to have to see him pull deep into his greatness to pull it out. And that's going to be fun. What's the most fun trope in pro sports, in my opinion? Watching a beloved athlete in their tender, older years, like no back Larry Bird or LeBron right now at 40.
Figure out how to
dig deep one more time and find that moment.
In LeBron's case, it's growth hormone. But like a lot of
and nepotism. But no, I'm saying I think we have to stop with Canelo. Now let's hear Bud talk about it, because I thought if you listen to his tone closely immediately after the fight, it tells you something.
I didn't want to talk at all about Canelo Alvarez coming into this fight because you were focused on Israel Madrimov. Now that fight is over, this fight is over, is Canelo Alvarez the fight you want next?
Well, you know what I say. If the money's right, we got to fight. But at the same time, he got to fight, that he's focused on. I'm going to go back to my family. I'm going to relax. I'm going to enjoy this win and enjoy all the accomplishments that I've made in the sport of boxing.
Look, this is not an insult, because what we were asking of him and him asking of himself with the idea of this Canelo fight at 37 to go up 3 weight classes essentially against one of the best in the world, it's insane. But I think I heard in his voice that he also realized naturally that there are limits to this. And we've seen this before where Adesanya talking about, I'm going to go up to heavyweight. And then he met Blachowicz and sort of like,
exactly right.
Let's peel that back a little bit. I don't know where he's going to go, though. It's going to be up to the Turkey to give him a big amount of money. I don't think he's going to be able to hold this peak form at this age a lot longer. That's why I think the Tszyu fight, to me, is going to be a big one that will be worth it.
You
but
down
maybe
with
he doesn't care about that.
Fedora,
I don't know.
Like, you like that fight or no?
What do you mean?
Fedora?
I think he does bad things to Fundora, but I think it's a marketable, entertaining fight for sure. Great stat here. Crawford becoming just the 7th boxer in history to win titles at both 135, which is lightweight, and all the way up to 154, which is junior middleweight. But the key part of the stat is the names that he joined: Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, Oscar De La Hoya, Pernell Whitaker, and Roberto Duran.
Wait, any big names, or is that?
Yeah, who was in attendance. Chuck, let's talk about the whole night. A couple of the key undercard moments we'll see later, and have you seen this shit? So I don't want to undress all of those. Look, this card was a gift to boxing fans in a lot of ways. And I loved the commitment from Turki Al-Sheikh to make it so deep. It almost felt like a blockbuster UFC card. Like there's fights you had to see. But it's too much of a good thing.
It's the most pregnant butt I've ever seen.
Sometimes too much. There's a lot I didn't love about it. Number one, the pacing's awful. And I didn't love that for as good as this card was depth-wise, and it was. I don't love on the broadcast being told every 5 minutes that this is the biggest card in U.S. history, because I'm not even sure that's actually true anymore. I think originally when you had Tim Tszyu versus Virgil Ortiz Jr. on top of all these great fights, unfortunately that fight fell off because Tszyu's cut wasn't healed in time. I think it took a hit with that fight falling off, but it was almost matter of fact, like this is the greatest card of all time. I don't know about that. Number 2, Chuck. I mean, I like the look of it. I like the fan appeal. There's celebrities everywhere. We don't need a 7-fight main card. We just don't in any sport. Like there's a point where it becomes too much of a one thing.
Well, 6 p.m. Eastern time start, right?
Yes.
And it ends at like
when did the main event come off? 1:30?
1:30.
I mean, I have no legs to stand on. I was a part of Masvidal Diaz. I didn't control that being a card that had the same pacing. But Chuck, this was horrific pacing. I just don't think we need a 4-man booth, first of all, because there's too many voices. I also don't think we need to go, even though I like doing those jobs and I like being the people that fill the time that I'm complaining about. Sure. I don't think we always need to go to every corner of the arena for a 5-6 minute breakdown after every single fight. Like,
you don't need that.
We don't need that. But my problem.
Don't need Eminem. Don't need that either.
Well, look, I'm not going to say
it was okay. I dug it, but
there were parts I did dig too, and I do acquiesce that he's such a big name and he's a Crawford fan that I'm not going to hate on that. I do think there is room to some degree. I don't love it. I'm a 46-year-old man living on the East Coast who's going, I don't really need 6 Eminem songs right now. I just need the boxing main event that I want to see here.
He kind of cut him short a little bit. You know?
Yeah, so I don't want to be that old curmudgeon that's like, no fun, no music. But when you're doing all of this at once, then it becomes hard to not say something. And when the cherry on top are weird fan giveaways that only extended the card, but you're giving away a car that's heavily invested by the Saudi Arabian government that no one's heard of, yet this guy in the crowd that won it doesn't seem like he wants it weird. Then they gave away a trip to Saudi Arabia at the end. And then they sang the Saudi Arabian national anthem. And I'm not going to be some like, there's no place for that. I do have some level of respect for what Turkey's bringing, which is a lot of money and a willingness to make these fights happen. But the level of propaganda, and I have a much bigger tolerance for this than someone like Luke Thomas for sure. But because of the respect and love and the purity I have for boxing, whatever is left of boxing purity, it's a ridiculous, obscene, absurd sport. But there is some sanctity within that. What I saw in that Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame honorary induction, it's bad enough that we have to have another fake WBC belt made that we're going to give to him as a gift and whatever. It's fine. Like, I mean, at some point, I respect Turkey and like what he's doing.
Sure.
But this fight was in LA. And seemingly in general, you can argue that what Turkey's doing is taking the focus off of Vegas to begin with as the fight capital, because he's putting big fights in Riyadh. Right. He's putting big fights and he wants to go to Tokyo, Sydney, Germany, all that. Great for boxing. But he never did a fight in Nevada before, yet the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame enters the ring to give him an honorary induction in which they're basically bowing down and worshiping him. And it's just awkward TV that makes no sense. And again, from whatever is left of boxing sanctity and OG-ness here, Chuck, it rubbed me chalkboard and, nails, cringe. Get this out of here. We don't want this. We don't need this. Chuck, I'm all for Turkey being in here. I'm all for him making the fights.
Same.
I don't need this. This extra stuff is starting to drive me the wrong way.
We get used to a certain kind of pageantry, and there's always going to be a kind of huddle around the money, right? Like there's always going to be people who huddle around wherever the money is at, and you're going to see people play that game. But it's usually fairly submerged. You don't really see it outwardly. It's more just an action over the course of time. The weird thing for me is I know it's prize fighting, but how many hands are warming up on this campfire with the obsequious kind of like, His Excellency, just outward respect. Like the Hall of Fame thing was way over the top.
It made no sense. What? How does that even make sense?
It feels that it reduces the whole fight game to some kind of groveling, like, all right, we want to be we're going to be a part.
To some degree, we are, because we are fans that have been left out for so long,
and I get
that we are waiting in line going, please, sir, can we have another great fight?
Right.
But there has to be a line.
There has to be a line. I just don't need to see that kind of pageantry throughout.
I don't want to be a part of that kind of pageantry. Yeah. And like, is this a parallel to what is going on with the UFC and Donald Trump, where it may not be your side of the political side, or maybe you just don't want politics in your sports? Isn't that used to be what the UFC was about? I remember just like 4 years ago, Dana was ripping on the whole NBA went woke thing. And now we've got that going on. And now in boxing, we got this going on.
I know.
Is this the BS we have to deal with to get the fights we want?
It opens up too many complicated things for simple fight game journalists as well. Like I feel like I have to talk about so much that
I haven't even asked you about the women's boxing and all that ridiculousness going on there. I don't know. We're in the show today for that.
What's funny, man, is like the close, and it's not too close of a comparison, but it's somewhat. We've seen pageantry. Like remember the Triller card where there was all this like concert spliced through.
Yes.
And it was like ridiculous. And you're like, dude, this is just nuts.
I can do one Metallica show. Sure. I don't need 9 rappers.
But I was at the Affliction show in 2008. It was Fedor Emelianenko, which is funny because I remember Donald Trump was part of that, but he was part of the ownership group with Oscar De La Hoya. But they had Megadeth playing, and I remember how weird it was because they kind of spliced in a couple of sets from Megadeth with the fights, and I was like, this does not go together. Like as much, even if you liked Megadeth, you'd be like, this is
Doesn't
just
make
two
sense.
different interests.
Yeah.
I was getting a little bit of that. I get that it's almost like a Super Bowl vibe with Eminem because he's a big name and he's kind of, he's revving a crowd up, and they certainly seemed in Los Angeles to really dig it. But it was after so much other pageantry
it was 1
that it was
a.m.
just, I know, and that there was just, it was too much. It was like how you start to feel almost a little ill with all the gratuitousness of something. That's what it felt
It's
like.
the same feeling I had a couple years ago, WrestleMania at Giant Stadium in New Jersey, where it was the same thing, where it started at 3 p.m. and it's still going on at 12:15 a.m. And you're just like, I love this, but you know what I mean? Like, there's got to be.
It takes away from the thing.
It does.
You're calling it the best, but I'm like, people want to see Crawford. I'm like, let's get on with the fight. I was watching the ppv.com feed, and
Sure.
there's like a
chat with Jim Lampley?
Yeah, there's a chat going on, and everybody on there is like, let's get on with the fight. Let's get on with the fight.
It was a
like,
bad look, and you're adding this. Like, look, there's an elephant in the room with Saudi Arabia's
sure
placement here, and we've all kind of come to terms in some degree with that. This made you question or queasy or weird. I mean, look, I love what Turkey's doing. In fact, I kind of get a kick out of Turkey as a personality to a certain degree.
He seems like he's a funny guy.
But how do you feel if you're a Madrimov team where this card is about, in some ways, is Crawford going to look good enough to fight Canelo? And you got Eminem, who's Crawford's buddy, coming out, go Crawford on the mic. I mean, like, just like small things that they asked Turkey his prediction.
No wonder Eddie Hearn felt like the whole world was against him.
Which we'll get to, but they asked Turkey for his prediction before the main event. And he's like, Crawford by 8th round knockout. And it's like,
I know.
If you're going to play the role of that promoter, I mean, I get it.
Wait, who echoed it afterward too? They're like, His Excellence said 8th round. I'm going with 8th round as well.
Too much. Let's close here on Crawford about what could be next here. Eddie Hearn lost his mind first about this scorecard. Before we throw to it, I don't think Eddie Hearn believes what he's saying. I think that he's trying to do his best for his fighter Madrimov, thinking, look, he came as close as you can come to upsetting a guy who many think is the pound for pound best in the sport. It was unlucky. If I fight and argue that he got robbed, it's going to be my only chance to get him this big money rematch. But he did go too far. Let's hear his rant.
It's a fight that could have gone either way, and it feels like a waste of time when you lose 116, 112. It's like they're already filled out before. Everyone knows His Excellency. They're coming up to me. Oh, you've ruined our plans. And it was that kind of fight. And then you hear the scorecards. It's a waste of time.
Appreciate that. I know Israel will be back. Guys.
Just like the wrong rant for the wrong situation. Like,
it was a little surprising.
I mean, as great as Madrimov fought and as great as he looked in round 7, 8, 9, that window, he didn't do enough in the first half to win these close rounds. He just didn't. So
true. There's no way you can call it a robbery.
No.
You just can't call it
and
a
he's
close
like, he's
fight a
okay
robbery.
with the 2 scorecards 7-5, but not 8-4. It's like this fight was so close that, like I said, if you have Madrimov winning, no one's going to argue with you. It was that close. There were people, though, that came out and was like, yo, Eddie, you're going too far. One of those was Dan Raphael, who said that Eddie was whining. Well, they relayed that message back to old Eddie. Let's listen.
Judgment. They both gave it to Crawford, and Dan Raphael said you need to stop whining.
Yeah, I saw that. Dan Raphael can go fuck himself. That's number one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And with the pajama, like he looks like Hugh Hefner with his pajamas.
He does.
It's so great.
I think he's just doing what's best for his fighter. The one name I didn't mention in when I said 154 is so loaded that I think there's big fights for Bud if he stays here. One of those is Virgil Ortiz Jr., who is actually fighting this Saturday against Sergey Boachuk, which is a very good fight, I believe, for a vacant title. He's promoted. Ortiz is, who's under, I think he's 18-0 with 18 knockouts by Oscar De La Hoya. That could be a big fight on the DAZN side with Turkey bankrolling it. So I think there's a couple stops for Crawford. I think we're going to all stop talking about Canelo, though. I think we should. And it sucks
I
because
think so.
It's going to put, well, no, maybe it doesn't suck. It is going to put the pressure back on Canelo to eventually fight Benavidez. So
it's just an interesting thing because I think if you're just a casual fan, right? Like if you're a casual fan who only tunes in for Canelo, maybe you catch the Crawford fights here and there and a couple of others. Maybe you're watching Fury or Usyk, you're probably still like, let's get that fight,
Yeah.
But I think if you watched what just happened on Saturday night, I don't know why you'd want that fight. I just don't think it would be competitive. Why would you want to take, I don't really want Bud's mystique to take a hit.
no,
I'd
I'd rather him retire unbeaten and make comments about where he should land historically. Be like, look, I never got beat. These are the names I beat. Where do you guys think I belong historically? Like, let's start having that discussion.
I mean, one of the reasons, I believe it was the Spence fight, right? Like Luke was moved to like basically tears, and I think that's the kind of cathartic event it was. It was so cathartic that it moved him into a space that you're like, he's going to be in that conversation. I don't want that compromised.
We should get Luke almost on a Grateful Dead-like tour of Crawford fights just to heal himself. Forget about
I like
acid.
that.
This is how
Yeah.
Luke's going to heal himself,
Yes.
right? I
Yeah.
want Luke to be happy at the end
Yeah.
of the day, don't you?
That's all I'm interested
Fuck
in.
that guy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Happy birthday. By the way, happy 45th to that great Luke Thomas. I love that man.